Welcome to this video where I will show you how to install Ubuntu in its server version. So, Ubuntu without a graphical interface, used for servers. If what you want is to download Ubuntu on a computer, a laptop, a workstation, then probably Ubuntu with a graphical interface with an office software and an internet browser. Please write me on the comment if you want the same video but for the desktop version of Ubuntu instead. I also have a generic video about installing Linux. Maybe that video may help you with the installation of the desktop version. So why to choose a server version for a server? Firstly, this version is optimized for server-type services. I highly recommend installing a Linux server operating system without a graphical interface. It makes a lighter server to boot up and update because many libraries and services used to manage the graphical interface are not installed. There is also less chance of having security vulnerabilities because fewer things are installed when you don't have a graphical interface installed. If you really want something more graphical to manage your Ubuntu server rather than by command line, maybe look at some web interface available for that. So the first step is to download Ubuntu. Here is the website address for Ubuntu, ubuntu.com. In the top bar, we have Get Ubuntu. By clicking on it, we see the different available versions. The one we are interested in for this video is the server version. This page also has several server options available. The version I will use to install in my local environment will be Ubuntu server. I will install it in a virtual machine on my local Proxmox server. But let's quickly explore what we have on this page. If you have a public cloud like AWS or Azure, you have this link. Multipass might also interest you. It is for having Ubuntu VMs on demand for your workstation. I never try it. Moz is for bare metal. I never explored this avenue too with Ubuntu to tell you about it. And finally, the last link is if you want to install Ubuntu on a physical server, this page will list the different servers hardware certified for Ubuntu server. As I mentioned earlier, I will download the standard server version. We have the Download Ubuntu Server button. On this page, I recommend downloading the latest LTS version. LTS means long-term support, so it is supported for a longer period. In other words, it will receive updates and security fixes for a longer time than the non-LTS version. So, if you see several versions listed here, choose the highest version followed by the word LTS. Until April 2026, the version 24.04 will be the latest LTS version. Version 24.04 was released in April 2024 and will be supported for 5 years for free and 10 years for Ubuntu Pro members. You can get Ubuntu Pro for free for up to 5 machines. Go to the page about Ubuntu Pro for more details. An LTS version is released every 2 years. Between LTS versions, there are non-LTS versions released every 6 months. I do not recommend these versions for a server, but if you ever need them, you know that option may be available. The software and services included in the non-LTS version will be more recent, but this version will only be supported for a few months. You will often have to upgrade to a new version. And further down the page, you have other architectures. Normally, you will know if you need to use one of these alternative architectures. Check the specs of your physical server for more details. In the majority of cases, the first version proposed on this page will be the version you need. So, let's go back to the top of the page. Click on the green download button for the Ubuntu server version you want to download. Once the download is complete, I invite you to verify the file you downloaded. It is an optional step, but I recommend it. This is to check the integrity of the downloaded .iso file and ensure that this is the one the Ubuntu team wanted to provide. It makes sure no one modified the ISO file, and it also ensures that it was entirely downloaded. The instructions are provided here on this page. If you need help to understand what is a checksum or what it means to verify a file integrity, I invite you to watch the video I made about it. It will help you to understand the purpose of checking a file's checksum. Now that the file is downloaded, we are ready to install Ubuntu Server. If you are installing it on a virtual machine, you need to open your virtualization software and create a virtual machine according to the specifications you want for your future Ubuntu server. In my case, I use Proxmox as a virtualization solution. I created a small virtual machine with 2 GB of memory, 2 virtual CPUs, and with a 128 GB hard drive. So adjust that according to your needs and the services you will install on your Linux server. After creating the virtual machine, it will still be possible to modify these specifications later if necessary. So, this instruction is if you want to install Ubuntu on a virtual machine, and I believe this is the most common way to install it. If you ever want to install it directly on a physical machine, you will need to create an installation media, for example, a removable USB media. Some tools like Balena Etcher will allow you to create a USB installation media from a linux.iso file. With that USB media, it will be possible to boot your machine from the USB device and start the operating system installation on that machine. I have a video explaining how to install Balena Etcher on a computer and how to create a USB media from an ISO file. I will put the link on the description. Let's return to my example, where I am going to install Ubuntu on a Proxmox machine. I have configured the .iso file that I just downloaded as the installation media for this new virtual machine. All I have to do now is to start the virtual machine and begin the installation of Ubuntu Server. So, the first menu to appear is this one. To install Ubuntu Server, choose Try or install Ubuntu Server. If you have a very recent physical machine or a specific need, it may be necessary to use a newer Linux kernel. Choose the HWE option in this case if available. And if you want to test the RAM memory of your machine, you can do it with this option. So I will choose the option to install the standard version of Ubuntu Server. Here we see several messages scrolling on the screen. You can ignore them and wait for the installation menu to appear. In fact, these texts indicate the services that are starting in the installation environment. It's just as information, there's nothing to understand. The only relevance is that if there is an issue during startup, this information can help you to diagnose it. And there it is, the installation menu appears. Unlike the desktop version, which has a nicer graphical interface for the installation process and can be controlled by the mouse, here we have a text mode graphical interface and we have to use the keyboard to control it. The first option is to select the language, so I will choose English. If your server is connected to the internet and detect that a new version of the installer is available, it will ask you if you want to update it before installing Ubuntu. I recommended doing this. Next is to configure the keyboard language and keyboard variant you want. I will choose English US. At each step, when you have finished and ready to go to the next step, you need to move down with the keyboard and press Enter when done is selected. In this next menu, we need to choose which Ubuntu server version we want to install. We have a standard version containing, as the description describes, the essentials for a comfortable experience to operate a server. This is the option I recommend to use. There is also a minimum version containing only the minimum of Ubuntu Server. If this is your first time installing Ubuntu Server, or if you are not sure which option to choose, select Ubuntu Server. If you need to install third-party drivers, check this box. To check a box, you need to press the spacebar on the keyboard when this option is selected. In my case, I will not check this for my virtual machine. And for my Ubuntu server, I don't actually need to read multimedia files or install special drivers. I don't have a graphics card or a Wi-Fi card to make it work. But this is an option that I always use when I install a desktop version of Ubuntu Linux or Linux Mint. For a server, I will leave it as it. So I will move down and select Done and press Enter. The next step is to configure the network interface and its IP address. By default, it is set to the automatic mode. With this mode, the IP address will be assigned by the DHCP server located in your network. And this IP address is displayed here. In my case, the IP address assigned to my machine is 10.00.116. We have the name of my network interface here. In my case, it is EANS18. So, if at this stage you want to configure a manual IP address for your Ubuntu server, select the network interface and press Enter, choose Edit IP4, and in the IP4 method field, you have to choose Manual. Then a menu will appear to configure the IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, and DNS servers. In my case, I will leave it on automatic, so I will click on Cancel here. I will leave it like that, and later, once installed, if needed when I put my Ubuntu server into operation, I will configure the IP address manually. I have a video on my YouTube channel explaining how to do it, how to configure a static IP address on an Ubuntu server machine. If in your network it is necessary to pass through a proxy to access the internet, you can enter your proxy server address here. In my case, I don't have one, and I will skip that step. Now, we are at the step of configuring the mirrors for the Ubuntu repositories. These Ubuntu repositories contain all the packages for the current version of Ubuntu. These official repositories are useful to receive all the Ubuntu updates and to install a software provided by Ubuntu. These officials Ubuntu repository are automatically added here. If you have other repositories to add manually, you can do it here. In my case, all those proposed by default are sufficient for my need. After the installation, if I need an additional repository to install a service, I will add it when the time comes to install it. So, I will click on Done to go to the next page. And here, it is the step to configure the disk partitioning. The first available option is the automatic mode, so it will configure the disk partitioning by itself. Some sub-options are available for the automatic mode. For example, to use the entire disk, it will format the entire disk and use it entirely to install the Ubuntu server. Here is the name of my hard drive. If you have more than one, be sure it is the good one you have selected to install Linux. If you want to use the LVM technology, you need to check this option. If you're wondering what LVM is, I have a video explaining it. If you want your data to be encrypted on your hard drive, you must check this option. By default, if you choose this option to encrypt the data, a password will be required each time the system boots. If you don't enter that correct password on boot, the system will not start correctly. File on it will not be accessible. Additional configuration need to be done if you want a way to decrypt the Ubuntu server system partition without having to enter a password at every boot. That topic can be covered on other video if needed. So, in my case, I am installing it on a virtual machine, and I will use the entire disk. When I install on a virtual machine, I almost always use the option to install Linux on the entire disk. I will use the LVM technology. Since this is a test machine, I will not encrypt my virtual machine. I will not have any sensitive data on this machine. So, even if someone steals my hard drives or my virtual machines, it will not be a big deal for me. If in your case there is already a system installed on this hard drive, or if one day you know that you will install another system alongside this one, it may be relevant to choose an option other than formatting the entire hard drive. Normally, installing a Linux system alongside another operating system on a virtual machine is not something logical to do, but I do that often when I install Linux on a physical machine. So, if you want to configure your hard drives in a customized way, you must choose the custom storage layout option. From this menu, you will be able to manually configure your partitions and keep the partitions you want to keep. Choose the size you want for your different partitions. It gives you more choices in the configuration options, but this requires more knowledge on partitioning. If necessary, I can make a dedicated video about manual partitioning. I will see if there is a demand for it. I will select Done and press Enter to move on to the next step. So, we are still in the steps about the hard drive partitioning. It gives us a little summary of what it will be done. It's very useful to review it if you have things on your hard drive that you do not want to lose. Check here what it will do to ensure that it will keep the things you want to keep. Of course, these are a lot of technical information about hard drive partitioning display here. Basically, it shows me what file systems will be present on my computer after the installation. I will have a logical LVM partition used for my /partition, so for my Linux system. Its size will be 63 gigabytes, and I will have a standard partition of 2 gigabytes used for my /boot. So this will be the partition containing the necessary files to boot my Ubuntu Linux system. Although the /boot files of Ubuntu Linux can be on the same partition as the system, and this even if it is in an LVM partition, the best practice is to put it in a standard partition, as this can avoid problems. So, it gives me a little summary here of the available disks. I will have an LVM volume group called Ubuntu VG. These things are related to LVM technology. And then the installation tool leaves 63 gigabytes of free space in the LVM configuration. If necessary later, I will be able to easily add it to my Linux system. We have a little summary of the logical volume that will be created and a little summary of how the hard drive will be partitioned. So, we have a first very small partition for the BIOS grub space. Grub is the first menu that appears to start your system. After that, we have a second partition for the /boot. As we saw earlier, we decided to use a separate standard partition for the /boot. So everything is well described, but at the same time, these are technical terms. If any of these topics need to be explored further, feel free to write it in the comments. And as I have selected the LVM option, it adds a bit of complexity in the disk configuration compared to a configuration with only standard partitions. But on the other hand, LVM offers some nice options. So, after analyzing all of this, there are 3 options. We can choose Done to apply these changes and move on to the next step, or we can choose Reset to revert to the current hard drive state and to redo a new partitioning configuration. So, if there is something incorrect in this proposed configuration, it is not too late. At this stage, nothing has been written to the hard drive. So, if you go back or if you turn off your computer and unplug your USB drive, you will be able to boot the system as it was before. Nothing has been changed yet. In my case, I will click on Done. And now it asks us to confirm it. The installation will begin and the changes will be written to the hard drive. Yes, I want to continue. Once the installation begins, we have some last things to configure. On this screen, it is to configure the first user for our Ubuntu server. I have to write the name for this first user I want to create. So, in my case, I will call it user1. Put the name you want for this user. This first created user will have administrative rights to manage your Ubuntu server. For the other users you want, you can create them once the Ubuntu Linux server will be installed. The first field is the display name for this user. The username will be configured in the third field in a few seconds. Here, it is the host name you want for this system. I will call it Ubuntu SRV03 in my case. So it's Ubuntu server, and this is my third Ubuntu server in my network. So, follow the standard you use on your network to name your machines. If you don't have one, at least give it a meaningful name. Now, it is the time to write the username for your new user. It is the name you will have to enter when you want to log in. In my case, the displayed name and the username will be the same. In the next line, we need to write the password we want to set up for our user. Make sure to choose a secure password since this user will have administrative rights on your machine. Next, we need to confirm the password we want. And once this is done, we can click on Done. So, as we saw earlier from the download page, Ubuntu Server is supported 5 years, and you can have an additional 5 years if you enable Ubuntu Pro for this machine. In this case, for Ubuntu 24.04 server, it will allow me to receive updates until 2034. However, to enable this option, you need to have an Ubuntu account and an Ubuntu Pro subscription. Of course, you can have up to 5 machines for free with Ubuntu Pro for personal use. So I'll let you explore those options if you are interested to use that option. In my case, I will skip it for now. I will stay with the standard version. And if I need longer support for this server later, I can subscribe this machine to Ubuntu Pro after the installation. So I will go to the next step. And here it asks me if I want to install the SSH server. An open SSH server will allow you to connect via SSH to this server and execute commands from an SSH client as if you were directly on this Linux server. I find this a very convenient way to configure a Linux server because I can copy and paste from my computer the commands I want to execute. It's very handy when I have documentation of what I need to do. In my case, yes, I will check it to enable it. If you don't check it and later you change your mind, I will probably make a video soon about it. How to install the SSH server and what to verify if you can't connect to it. If you already have an SSH key, you can import it here. These are more advanced topics that will not be covered in this video. And I will press done to move on to the next step. Although we can install services after the Ubuntu installation, this tool offers me some services I can install now. So if there is a service here you want to install, you can check it. In my case, I will not check anything. I will leave everything as default and will click on Finish. As a reminder, if you want to check something, select it and press the Escape key. That was the last step to configure, and here we have the installation log. So my machine is currently already installing Ubuntu Server. While I configured the last steps, the installation process was already started and it has completed all these steps. Once again, all of this is indicative only. There's no need to be afraid if you don't understand what is written here. Personally, I prefer to have technical information like this, indicating what it is currently doing. It shows us the progress made. I will get back to you when the system is installed. And there you go. The installation is complete, and we have the option at the bottom to restart now. I will press enter and the server will restart. So it asks us to remove the installation media. If it's a physical machine, remove your USB drive and press enter. After, the machine should boot into the new system we just installed. For most virtual machine solutions, the installation disk will be removed automatically. This is the case for Proxmox and VirtualBox. Once the new system has booted, it prompts us to enter our username to log into our session. In my case, I had to press enter to make the login prompt appear more clearly. This is the user I have created a few minutes ago that I need to enter. The user password is also requested. Once logged in, some information about our system is displayed, including the machine's IP address, the used disk space, and the number of connected users. It is also possible to see the number of packages that can be updated. So, at this stage, you can run all possible Linux commands, and you can install the services you want on your Ubuntu Linux server. So, if you want to follow my tutorial on how to install Nagios to monitor some hosts in your network, this is where you can start following the tutorial about it. I have a video explaining these steps. So, before concluding the video, I will quickly show you how to perform updates. The first step is to update the index of the repositories configured on our Ubuntu machine, which is done with the command sudo apt update. Sudo is used to run the command with administrative rights. We need to enter our password when we use sudo. Once the package's index is updated, it's now time to perform the updates. We can do this with almost the same command, but replace update by upgrade. A brief summary will be displayed, listing all the packages that will be updated, as well as the number of packages that will be updated and the total size of the packages that will be downloaded. It asks me if I want to continue. I will press Y for yes, and the installation of the updates will begin. Once completed, it may sometimes be recommended to restart the server. For example, if a new version of the Linux kernel was installed by the updates, you need to restart your system to boot into that new kernel version. Normally, in my case, I always restart my machines after an update. I always schedule a maintenance period to perform any update, and that includes a downtime for the reboot. To restart, you simply need to use the command reboot. So thank you for watching this video. I hope it was helpful for you and I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to write in the comments what you think about it. How were your Ubuntu server installations going? What configurations are you using? I would be happy to read them and perhaps your information would help other users. So have a nice day. Bye bye.